you're going to be in a lot of pyramids in your life, dominance hierarchies and different states and families and all of that. And they'll arrange themselves into a hierarchy, and there'll be something at the top, and the top is the thing that can do well across hierarchies. So it's not stuck in any one pyramid, and it's partly associated with vision and the ability to see a long, long distance. Also to see what you don't want to see and to report that back to the king. And so the king, fundamentally, as far as you guys are concerned from a psychological perspective, that's your superego. That's the Freudian perspective. Or it might be the moral system by which you comport yourself. But your eyes are the thing that updates that, right? You need it to orient yourself in the world. You need it to orient yourself among other people. But your eye and your capacity to pay attention, especially to what you don't want to pay attention to, is the thing that continually updates that model, exactly as Piaget laid out with children. The world with reflexes, and maybe a more modern psychologist would also concentrate on the implicit motivations, and those have to be organized inside the child into some kind of hierarchy of unity before the child can organize him or herself into the broader unity of the state, and that's basically what's being represented here. And so Zazu, the eyes of the king, comes to check out the king, and that's, what's his name? What's the king's name? Mufasa, yeah, and he's a very regal-looking person, lion, and he stands up straight and tall, and that means that he's high in serotonin, because serotonin governs postural flexion, and if you're dominant and near the top of hierarchies, you tend to expand so that you look bigger than you could if you shrunk down. And so if you're a low dominant person, you wander around like this so that you look small and weak, and you don't pose a threat to anybody. But if you're at the top, you expand yourself so that you can command the space, and that's why he has that particular kind of regal posture. And if you look at his facial expression, you see that it's quite severe. He's capable of kindness, but he's also harsh and judgmental, and that's what society is like. That's what the superego is like, and what that means is that he's integrated his aggression. And I've seen this happen in my clinical clients when they come in and they're too agreeable. They look like Simba looks later in the movie when he's an adolescent, and he's sort of like a deer in the headlights. Everything is coming in and nothing is coming out. But when the person integrates their shadow and gets the aggressive part of themselves integrated into their personality, their faces harden. And if you look at people, you can tell, because the people who are too agreeable look childlike and innocent, and the people who, well, a hyper-aggressive person will look, mean and cruel. But let's see if that's good. That's still working. So, but I've seen people's face change in the course of therapy, men and women. So, and what happens is they start to look more mature, and it's more like they're judging the world as well as interacting with it properly once they integrate that more disagreeable part of them. It's very, very necessary, and that's part of the incorporation of the Jungian shadow, or the incorporation of the unconscious from a Freudian perspective. But old Musafa there, he's already got that covered. So, and he's capable, obviously he can smile, and he's capable of the full range of expressions, but he's a tough-looking character. The lion is an apex predator, and so, which means it's at the top of the food chain, roughly speaking, and it's sort of golden like the sun, so that's also useful. And it has that mane that makes it look majestic, and of course it's very physically powerful, and it's intimidating. And so it's something that you run away from as well, right? Or you're awestruck by. So the fact that, it's like Snail King just doesn't make any sense, right? But Lion King, that works. And you got to think about those things, because it's not self-evident why a lion would work as a king, but a snail wouldn't. All right, so now Mufasa has taken Simba up to the top of the pyramid, right? So that's the aluminum place, let's say, or the place of the eye where you can really see a long ways, and he's explaining to him what his kingdom is going to be. And you see the sun, of course, appears at that to begin with, and that's another hint about being at the top. That's the illuminated part of the pyramid. And so they're up there talking, and what Mufasa tells Simba is that his kingdom is every place the light has touched. And that's so brilliant. So one of the things you'll notice if you move into a new apartment, you're like a cat. Cats don't like changing houses, and they have to zoom around in every corner to see exactly what the hell's going on there before they calm down. They need to know where they can hide and where the potential dangers are. And what you'll find if you move into a new place, that you will not be comfortable there until you've investigated, potentially cleaned and repaired every single square inch of it. The more attention you pay to it, the more it'll become yours. And that's far more than mere material ownership, which is also relevant. But in order to feel comfortable somewhere and to dominate that place, to be enmeshed in that place, you have to attend to it. You have to shine light on every corner. And you have to do that with yourself and with your relationships as well. And so anyways, Mufasa tells Simba that his kingdom is everything that the light shines on. And that's exactly right. And then there's a metaphor there too, which is that what you've shone light on, which is what you've come to understand and master, is surrounded by an other world of all the things that you don't understand. And some of those would be natural things, and some of them would be tyrannical things, and some of those would be things you don't want to know about yourself. But they're outside of where you've managed to shine the light. And so that's exactly what Mufasa tells Simba. He says, we live in this pyramid, we're at the top, there's a domain of light around it that's explored territory. Outside of that, there's unexplored territory, and that's partly the unconscious, because you fill it with fantasy, and it's partly what you just don't know. And then Mufasa tells Simba, and it's sort of like God telling Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden not to eat the apple. Mufasa tells Simba, there's this outside place that's dark, that's not part of your kingdom, and you should not go there. And that's really interesting, because Simba doesn't even know about that place yet. And so Mufasa is doing something very contradictory there. It's like telling him that it exists, and heightening his curiosity, but also saying that he shouldn't go there, almost ensuring that that's exactly what Simba is going to do. The state puts pressure on you to regulate your emotions, positive, negative, and positive, and it crushes you. It crushes the life out of you, a lot of it. And so you end up, your age, and you're all mopey because especially because you've been forced to sit down in school for like 17 years, you're all mopey, and it's no wonder, you've had the spirit taken out of you by the process of discipline. But without that, you'd be completely useless. So it's another one of those paradoxical, gifts and catastrophes that you encounter as you move through life. So then Simba encounters the anima. That's the anima, the Jungian anima. And the anima is the feminine counterpart in the soul. And she, you can tell what she does to him, right? Because she's got this supercilious and what would you say, judgmental and teasy look on her face. And she's really trying to put him down, and it's working like mad. He's not very happy about that at all. And she's the thing, this is what the anima does, the soul. She's the thing that teaches the exploratory hero that it's not everything it could be, right? And that's part of, this can be read multiple ways, but it's part of the eternal tendency of women to make men self-conscious by their sexual selectivity. That's part of it, because that makes men self-conscious like nothing else. And it's also perhaps been one of the phenomena that's produced the evolutionary arms race in the sexes among human beings that's caused our rapid cortical expansion and our quick movement away from chimpanzees, who aren't selective maters, by the way. He's the son of a king, so he's very, very privileged, and he confuses his privilege with competence, which of course all of you do, because you're all sons of the king, which is why you can sit here in the university, and you confuse your privilege with competence as well, because has nothing to do with any of you that the lights are on and this place is so peaceful, right? But you take that for granted, and it can make you false and arrogant. He's in for real trouble, man. He thinks he knows everything. And of course, then he has a wrestling match with... what's her name? Was it? Nala, yeah, has a wrestling match with Nala, and she just pins him every time, right? Got you again, pinned you again. And that's basically right. One of the things that happens with men when they meet a woman who they really desire and admire is they project an ideal onto her immediately. That's an anima projection. And then that anima projection judges them, and they act all inferior and stupid. And it's partly because they are. That's why. And so then they go down in defeat constantly to this thing that they're projecting, which at least has some concordance with the actual woman, but not that much. So, okay, they keep wrestling, and then they're on the fringe of the kingdom. This wrestling match between this pairs of opposites takes them to the edge of the kingdom, and they end up in the elephant's graveyard, right? And there's bones everywhere. And so now they're out into the kingdom of death. And what that means is that these two kids, as they've grown up, encounter death, right? They go outside the light, and it's very, very shocking for them. They're very curious about it, obviously. They go to explore the skeletons and all of that, even though they were told not to. But their curiosity, they can't stay away from death. They're too curious about it. And so they develop knowledge of death. And then, of course, out there in the deadlands is where the hyenas are. And that's exactly right, because hyenas are scavengers, right? And they can break bones with their teeth. They're really, really quite the animal. And, you know, you kind of have a shudder of repugnance when you see those things. And I think it's partly, I mean, we shared an evolutionary landscape with the ancestors of hyenas for a very, very long time. And like vultures too, you know. You couldn't imagine something that would be more well designed to look like it was a horrible thing than a vulture, right? And there's this weird concordance, and crows and ravens are like that too, carrion eaters, you know. Eagles are kind of an exception, but they look just as creepy as they are, which is really quite interesting. And of course, hyenas fall into that category, and they laugh too, which is, you know, really? You also have to laugh, really, with all these other things you have going for you? And anyways, the hyenas are enemies of lions, and they can take lions down. They're tough things, and you know, they not one hyena obviously, but a bunch of hyenas can give a lion a pretty damn rough time. And these little lions are really no match for the hyenas, and so they get threatened very, very rapidly. And one of the hyenas, of course, is just completely out of its mind. And one of the things that's really interesting, and you see this with the Muppets too. There was often a puppet that was like a crazy puppet, and its eyes would move in different directions. You know, and one of the things that happens with people who are schizophrenic is they show involuntary eye movements. And it's because you have a brain center that controls your eyes voluntarily, and you have another one that controls them involuntarily. So you can see that. Look ahead and try to move your eyes smoothly back and forth. You can't do it. You'll see that they jerk, hey? But if you put a finger in front of your face and then do this, they'll move perfectly smoothly, and that's because you're using different eye control centers, one voluntary and one more involuntary, and the involuntary one is actually more sophisticated. And so in schizophrenics, the involuntary eye control centers tend to disrupt the voluntary eye control centers, and that's likely part of the hallucinatory process, you know, because you have the ego in the schizophrenic that's being disrupted by processes underneath, fantasies and that sort of thing, and that looks like it's reflected in involuntary eye movements, like dream movements. So anyways, so much for the crazy hyena, and they're in real trouble. Now the king's eye, who's supposed to be keeping an eye on this and was supposed to be watching Simba, is trying to intervene, but I mean, look at him. He's like a delicious little bird, and so that's not working out very well.